Welcome to the MMHP in the 989, channeling all styles and eras of Michigan music history, recorded live from the Michigan Rock Legends Hall of Fame, located inside the Bay County Historical Museum,
from the city by the bay,
featuring Dr. J, Fred Reif, Mr. Mike, and your host, Scott Baker. Brought to you by the 989 Podcast Network and the Michigan Rock Legends Hall of Fame, located at the Bay County Historical Society Museum at 321 Washington Avenue, Bay City, Michigan.
Let's do it.
Sure, we're here at the Michigan Rock Legends Hall of Fame here in Bay City on a very cold week here in January 2024. Today, with the four of us here, are blessed with the Duke of Juke, the man himself. We've been wanting this man since our first year, and Robert came to our show last fall that we put on, and Robert Barclay's in the house. He decided to come and share photos and stories with us. How you doing, Mr. Barclay?
I'm doing good. Don't call me Mr. Barclay. That was my father.
All right. I get that a lot. All right, Robert.
Bob. That was my father as well.
All right. Well, the voice you guys hear every Sunday night on WCMU radio for how many years?
Coming up on 39.
39.
Yeah,
Dang,
you
you're
got
40.
that big 40 coming up. What is next year,
We're
April?
trying to figure out what we're going to do about
Oh
that.
my gosh!
Your voice throughout the state. I've been playing gigs all over, and that's one thing they say when I say I've been on CMU and I've been on this radio or whatever. They ask me, Robert Barclay, and they know that name. It's a household name in our state. Thank you for all you've done for the blues. Thank you all you've done for the photography. This is just the time that we've gotten to know each other very little, but I've been following you since I've been a kid, obviously. So thank you for coming on our show.
Yeah.
We're going to ask you questions that hopefully no one's asked you. So
Can I tell a Luther Allison story?
please start with that. Yeah.
Luther Allison was from Arkansas, but he made his way up to Chicago. He thought he wanted to be a baseball player. This is Luther telling me this. He wanted to be a baseball player. Well, baseball in the 50s, that was, that's the dream of a lot of kids, not just the 50s, but especially in the 50s. And then he thought, well, I'm not a good enough baseball player. Maybe I could be a cobbler, shoe repairman. Wow. But he started playing guitar. Anyway, make a long story short, I ended up seeing him backstage out in Portland, Oregon. I said, Luther, I want to interview you for my show in Michigan. He says, I do a radio show in Michigan. He goes, where, Ann Arbor? And I said, no, but another college town. And he said, oh, Mount Pleasant? First out of the chute was Ann Arbor. Then he said, how did he come up? Why didn't he say Ypsilanti or Grand Rapids or Kalamazoo?
East Lansing,
He says, I used to play a gig there at the Alibi. I said, Luther, the Alibi is where CMU Public Radio is. We're in that building. And the college bought the university bought the building. And so anyway, Luther was telling me he was there in the early 70s, and there were quite a few students. We have a lot of students from India on our campus because we had a president's wife was from India. So she attracted a lot of students from India to CMU. But back in this day, in the early 70s, they were from Saudi Arabia. So Luther's up there playing, wondering when to take a break. He says, hey, buddy, what time is it? And he goes, it's about 10:15. Oh, okay. So they play a little bit more. What time is it now? Oh, it's 10:45. Okay, we're going to take a break. The guy comes over to me and says, here, take my watch. Then you'll know when your next break is. He goes, oh, okay. So thanks. So he sits down on top of the amplifier and takes a look at it a little later. And he said, we're going to take another break. We're going to do a couple more tunes, and then that'll be the show for tonight. So he goes to return the watch to the guy from Saudi Arabia. And he goes, maybe someday you'll come to Saudi Arabia and play for me. You can keep the watch. Really? Oh, no, I can't keep your watch. And he goes, no, keep it. It's a souvenir. So they're playing cards 3 or 4 days down the road. I don't know if it was in somebody's hotel room or whatever. And Luther just took his watch off and he just sits there and they're playing cards. One of his bandmates went, Luther, that's a Rolex. And he goes,
Oh,
no, man. That's a Timex. That's Timex. No, Luther, that is a $5,000 or $10,000 watch. Where did you get this? He goes, yeah, this CMU student from Saudi Arabia gave it to me. He said maybe he'll come play in Saudi Arabia someday. Yeah, I don't think he ever made the connection with the guy again. But anyway,
Wow.
that was one of my favorite stories about Luther.
Incredible. Luther Allison. Wow.
And he told me that story with the mic on, so that I got the story to share on the radio,
Wonderful.
which is fun.
Wow.
Keeping it in Luther Allison's corner, do you know anything about the recording he did with the Rolling Stones, or on the Rolling Stones label, that somehow was never released? Did you get
Doesn't
any?
ring a bell to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought he was the
Beggar's Banquet?
No, this was, the Stones started their own label.
I mean,
and they
what was
were
the label?
signing, Peter Tosh
Yeah.
was, probably
was
one of
trying
the
to think
real
of the name
well-known
of the
people.
label.
But I seem to remember that Luther Allison had recorded an album. I don't know if Mick or Keith.
No, that's
No,
Bob Marley.
that was Marley's label. What was the name of it? Do you remember the name of that label? I
Was
thinking
Rolling Stones Records.
Oh, it was? Okay. I thought
Yeah.
maybe they called their label Beggar's Banquet or
Well,
something.
Luther was living in France for
Yeah.
the last number of years.
Maybe there's-
before he passed.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he just started making a big splash when he got signed to Alligator Records in
Right.
94 or so. He died in 97. But those last 3 albums were all killer albums.
They were.
Oh,
They
man.
were.
I remember
He was
when-
on fire.
Buddy Guy was hot through the 90s there. Luther started his big final run, and Sun Seals was getting some kudos too.
Oh, yeah.
And so I didn't know anything about Sun Seals, so that was like, whoa, all these
Yeah.
artists to check out here. And I thought Luther and Sun Seals, they both passed not too long after, and it was like fabulous guys that got lost in the mix somehow a little bit. Blues lovers know them, but
I actually lost control of my emotions the night, not that Luther died, but I had gotten word that the doctor said, you've only got a few days left.
Oh,
so
really?
I broke that news on the air, and my voice cracked, and
I was very emotional.
that just the news of it. When he did die, it wasn't a shock because we knew it was coming. I had no idea he was, big cigarette smoker for decades. So, yeah, cancer.
Well, the time I saw him, the first time, was at the Ann Arbor Blues Fest, 1970.
Okay.
And that's how I booked him in Saginaw after that. But it was a battle. They were trying to make it into a battle, him and Johnny Winter.
Oh, yeah.
And Johnny Winter, he played first, and he was okay. But he was like a chicken with his head cut off. I mean, he was just... And Luther just kept looking at him with his hands on his guitar, ready to go. And soon as Johnny goes, it was Luther's turn.
Yeah.
He just went, and it got louder and louder, and then he went, and the crowd just went nuts. And
wow.
Johnny Winter, shortly after, unplugged his amp.
Really?
And that means Luther won the battle, apparently.
Oh, yeah. Got it.
Yeah, that was
Got
the
it.
first time I saw Luther Allison, too. That was
Oh,
great.
you were there?
Yeah, we went to the first few blues festivals in Ann Arbor. Yeah, they were great.
I interviewed one of his drummers, and he said there's one thing about Luther when he was playing a theater versus a club. When he was playing in a theater like Kalamazoo State Theater downtown, you made sure you didn't have a couple of beers before you got on stage because Luther would not stop. He'd play for 4 hours. If the venue let him, he would play for that many hours. There was no time to go to the restroom if you were drinking beer. There was no way. He said he just had stamina, and he did, and it was really intense stuff.
Where did you book him in Saginaw, Fred?
Ace of Clubs.
Oh, okay. What did that become?
That's where
Deja
Deja
Vu.
Vu is now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it became the scene. That was,
I'll be dang.
but
Yeah.
that was for a short time.
But that back then, there was hardly anything on West Side Saginaw Road. It was all
No, it was
farm
still a
country.
dirt road, I think.
Well, Saginaw Valley State hadn't built yet,
Right.
so
Wow.
yeah, it was very, very different going out West Side Saginaw Road back in those days. And it was like the Ace of Clubs was one of the very few businesses out on a whole stretch of road there, from basically where the Michigan House was at that time, or Howard Johnson's, right at that junction there on the way to Delta College, all the way to almost Tittabawassee.
Tittabawassee,
Yeah, there was hardly anything out there. Well, I tell you what, I'm real interested. We talked about this a little bit, your background growing up and how you moved all over the United States. Maybe could kind of tell us a little bit about your youth, and did that in any place where you were living, did you find out about the blues there, or how did you get into this?
Well, I was born in Cambridge, Mass. My mother was from the white ghetto there, and my father was an MIT student, and he wanted to be an engineer. And when he graduated from MIT, they got married, and he got his first job on Long Island, New York, West Babylon, Long Island, on the southern part of the island, Suffolk County. And I went through the 6th grade there. He took another job in Allentown, PA, so I went like half of 6th and all of 7th grade. Then he got transferred to Huntsville, Alabama, right after George Wallace said, "No, we will not integrate our schools." And he just said that publicly. Everybody knows those stories.
Oh, yeah.
But the thing that I really liked about living in Alabama, even though I was only there a year and a half, the second month I was there, kids were all excited. He says, "Hey, the Beatles are going to be on Ed Sullivan." We've all been hearing about them. Well, the Beatles, I love the Beatles, but then when the Stones were on, that was it. They said, these guys are cool. I mean, they didn't have matching outfits like the Beatles wore,
Right.
the collarless, the gray collarless suits. They all, Jagger wore a sweatshirt sometimes. And yeah, that was cool. So I'm one of these kids, flipped the album over. Who's Willie Dixon? Well, Willie Dixon wrote this. Who's Chester Burnett? Well, that was Howlin' Wolf. Well, who is Slim Harpo? Who I'm featuring him this Sunday night.
Ooh,
Slim Harpo,
favorite.
He turned 100. I mean, he
Would have been
died in
100.
1970.
Yeah.
But it's a centennial of his birth. So I went online, and I digress here. I went online and I said, well, who did all these covers of Slim Harpo tunes? So I'm going to play a whole ton of covers. A lot of people love Slim Harpo. Anyway, through the Rolling Stones and especially the Animals were the groups that, I mean, they turned me on to the Animals. I didn't know who Bo Diddley was. Mm-hmm. The Animals were doing Bo Diddley tunes.
Yeah, me too.
The story of Bo Diddley was like a 5 or 6 minute tune, so it wouldn't get played on AM radio because AM radio was all about 2.5 minutes and put an advertisement on. But when you start buying the albums, who is Bo Diddley? That's kind of an unusual name. I wanted to find out who Bo Diddley was. Then Dad got transferred to Los Angeles, which is where I went to high school, and then college in Santa Barbara. He got married. My son was born out there. But out there, I was more into. I wasn't. If I'd have had the chutzpah to do it, or even knew where to even look for it, I would have gone down into Watts, which is where the Parisian Room. I remember driving by the Parisian Room. It would say, "Tonight only, Jimmy Witherspoon." I didn't know who Jimmy Witherspoon was. I was into the Doors, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. I got to see all of them. I got to see just about everybody I wanted to see except for the Beatles, but that's because they stopped touring. So really, my door into the blues was through the Rolling Stones and the Animals especially. That's one angle, the Chicago-style blues. Mm-hmm. Elvis Presley, I was already an Elvis fan. After living in Alabama, Elvis still had his fans in Alabama. I mean, Mississippi and Memphis is just to the west of Alabama. And he turned me on to people like Roy Brown, Winoni Harris, Arthur Big Boy
Gunter.
Crudup, Arthur Gunter, who didn't he die in Michigan?
Yeah.
Down in
Port
Pontiac?
Huron.
Port Huron. Okay. So Elvis turned me on to those art. He tended to like the singers. He wasn't necessarily into because he
Right.
wasn't a guitarist. He could flail on and play a few chords. But Elvis turned me on to the singers that he covered. He covered their tunes.
Yeah, Elvis in the 50s.
Oh yeah.
That's pretty tough to beat there.
Oh yeah.
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 Wow.
Yeah. Mystery Train. That's one of the all-time
boy.
great tunes. Well, that was Junior Parker and the Blue Flames that did
Right.
it first. For the same label that Elvis recorded Mystery Train. Gives me goosebumps just thinking about it. And then the third door into the blues came on those early, especially the first Bob Dylan album, when he did Song to Woody Guthrie. He did See That My Grave Is Kept Clean. He did a Book of White tune, Fixin' to Die. And I went, who is Booker White, It was always spelled Bukka. Well, that's not his name. That's how he says it. His name is Booker T. Washington White. That was his birth name, and everybody just called him Booker because that's how he said his name. But it was really Booker.
Interesting.
But I learned all that from listening to those early Bob Dylan albums, especially the very first one. So those are the three doors: Dylan, the Stones and Animals, and Elvis.
Well, Fred and I have talked about this several times, and it was the same thing with us. We had no idea who Howlin' Wolf or
And
Muddy Waters, any of those people were. They were never played on the radio. So when the British invasion bands, like you say, the Animals, the Stones, the Yardbirds was another one, that's where you really got into it, digging into who are these people and what do they sound like? And, that was fun.
Well, it was when the Stones were booked onto Shindig. He said, well, we don't want to play on Shindig unless you get Howlin' Wolf on there.
Oh, wow.
So Dick Waterman was telling me he was Son House's manager, booking agent, just about everything for Son House. They're backstage, and this old man was talking to Howlin' Wolf. And I can't remember, I think it was Keith Richards said, Dick, who's the old man talking to Howlin' Wolf? And he goes, oh, that's Son House. That's Son. Holy smokes! I didn't even know he was still around.
Yeah.
Well, that was when he came back into the recording studio in '64 through the work of Dick Waterman.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That was the coolest episode of Shindig ever.
Oh, I know.
When they had Howlin' Wolf on. And how much the Stones were into it, too.
Oh,
Brian
definitely.
Jones and
Who
Mick
was
Jagger.
the backup band? Was it the Shindig
I think it
band
was
or
probably James Burton and the Shindogs. I think backed him. I've got it on video. I should dig that out and take a look at that and see if I could pick out who the band is. But they
James
backed everybody.
Burton was in it?
James Burton was the
Really?
guitar player in the Shindogs, at least the first year or so on Shindig. And Delaney Bramlett was, I think, one of the other guys in that band. And Leon Russell for a while. They were
Well,
all,
they did a great job.
Oh, yeah, they were terrific. They could play anything. So, yeah, Shindig was a pretty cool little music show.
Did all that moving around early on, getting friends, losing friends, and moving away, did that draw you more to music because it was a comfort, or tell me how moving around affected that?
I didn't have any negative effect at all. We talked about my brother. My brother did. He didn't like moving around that much. And my sister was real young, when we did all that moving around. But I was in Alabama when I was 14 and 15, when I was starting to buy the Beatles records and Elvis records and the Animals. When we moved to L.A., Dad sat us down at the dinner table and he says, I have 3 job offers. Do you want to move to Hartford, Connecticut, Cincinnati, Ohio, or Los Angeles? And I went, We're talking the spring of 1966. And I went, oh, Dad, come on. Are you kidding me? L.A.? You have a job offer in L.A.? He says, yep, my former boss from the 50s wants to hire me, and he showed us around and blah blah blah. He said it's going to be, looks like it's going to be the deal. So he'd already accepted the job because he knew. I think he knew. Not to say anything is bad about Cincinnati. Cincinnati's got its own history, musically. King Records.
Yeah.
And Hartford, whatever. I don't know anything about Hartford, but I definitely knew about L.A.
Well, you're close to New York.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so
true.
That's a
That's
plus
true.
for Hartford.
Now, where does Oregon come in the picture? It seemed
Peggy,
like,
my wife Peggy is from Portland.
okay,
Yeah.
that's where,
Yeah.
I knew Oregon was somewhere in your,
Well, she
Right.
said to me, I was wearing a kind of a flannel shirt outside the darkroom. I was washing and she was washing her prints, and we were both photography majors, and I was drying mine on the drum dryer. And she said, I look like an Oregon guy because I had on a flannel shirt. She goes, if you'd have looked like a surfer dude, I wouldn't have even said hello to you. So wait a minute, I went to high school with surfer dudes.
Wow.
So yeah, and she was more into Chris Christopherson, John Prine, Steve Goodman, Guy Clark. Those are her all-time favorites. Joan Baez,
Songwriters.
more the songwriters, the acoustic,
Folky.
especially on the acoustic side.
what issue did you get involved in Living Blues, the first one?
I called Jim O'Neill,
Right.
and I said he was the co-founder. He and his
Yeah, him and
ex-wife Amy
and Bruce.
Yeah. And Bruce Ziegler, Chris Strakowitz was, he advertised our Hurley records in Living Blues. And I'd buy all the back issues. I'd come into Elderly Instruments in the early 80s, and there'd be all these back issues of Living Blues. And I went, and I bought all of them. Then I'd come in several months later, and there'd be 2 or 3 more. So I ended up, I think I have 96% of all their issues. They're up to like
I have
issue
all
number-
the early ones.
yeah.
black
I'm missing
and
a
white ones.
few early ones. I bought them at a record. Some of them I bought at the record store. The guy said, "All right, issue number 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. I've got those. You can have them for $5 each." And I went, "Oh, okay." But issue number 1 with Howlin' Wolf on the cover, that one's going to cost you $10. Well, I was an idiot. I can't believe it. I said, I thought he was just trying to rip me off.
Well, the first few issues, they came to Detroit, and it was at the actually the very first Detroit Blues Festival.
Okay.
And I think Washboard Willie, they got a lot of pictures.
Super
in there.
Suds of Rhythm.
Right. And Bobo and
What year was that, Fred?
70 or 71.
70 or 71.
The first issue came out in 70, and Washboard Willie was on the cover of number 2 or number 3.
Okay, that was number 2.
Yeah, okay.
And then they had an article about Bobo,
Yeah,
and that's sort of how I got acquainted.
sure. Yeah.
I went, oh, he sounds like an interesting guy. And
Mm-hmm.
so we started communicating, and
With Jim O'Neill, you mean?
no, with Bobo.
Oh, with Bobo Jenkins.
But with Jim O'Neill, we still communicate to this day.
Yeah. Well, he got me my first photo credential
Oh,
for the
okay.
Chicago Blues Fest. Started in 84. I didn't know about it. Then it went to 85. I still didn't know about it. But a friend of mine around the corner went to it. He said, "Here, look who I just saw at the Chicago Blues Fest." He gave it this incredible
Yeah.
lineup. I mean, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Pee Wee Creighton and tons of other people. He says, "You ought to go to it, and it's free." I went, "Free?" So the next year, 1986, was my first one, and the only one
too.
I've missed since then. Oh, is that right?
I got that poster,
Oh, okay.
that big poster.
Well, I remember Chuck Berry was a headliner one night, and the security guy said, "You might want to have your camera bag around your neck or on your shoulder, because I won't be able to protect you guys, all your cameras, from that crowd when Chuck gets up here."
Oh.
Chuck will make people go crazy. He goes, "No, he's got a special guest."
Oh,
Oh. Is it one of the Stones? And he said, I can't tell you. Keith Richards? And he goes, you're getting real hot. And I looked over at the doorway, the backstage door, and there's Keith Richards with his guitar around his neck and his cord all coiled up. And he's waiting for his cue to come out on stage. And one of my favorite photos from that, and you remember Chuck Berry could be difficult.
Oh, yeah.
He and Keith butted heads on stage, and Chuck flips him off. And I got a shot of Chuck like this. Keith's not in the picture. It's just a shot of Chuck. And I honestly didn't know I got it until I developed the film.
Oh.
That was black and white film back then.
Beautiful.
It's never been published. And I don't feel like I really want to exploit that little moment. Even though what's his name did the shot of Johnny Cash at think it was that.
Yeah, Jim Marshall.
Folsom. Yeah, Jim. That's right, Jim. I've got about 6 of his photography books. Mm-hmm. He did a whole one on just Johnny Cash at the prison. But yeah, he got that.
Wow.
Anyway,
is that on this?
How many covers have you?
Is what
that photo?
Oh, that's a Jim Marshall photo.
Oh no, I meant you. Your photo of Chuck.
No.
Okay.
No, sorry. I'm sorry.
He's giving us some photos to use for the show here on this.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there's like a lot of them are. See, I'm married to a photographer who likes to go when I'm interviewing somebody. So I have pictures of me with interviewing Lil Milton, B.B. King, James Brown, Wilson Pickett, with Bo Diddley.
What was Wilson Pickett like?
He was good. He was good.
What year?
It would have been 1999 or 2000.
Oh, okay.
At the Soaring Eagle Casino.
Right.
Because I booked the Falcons. You were probably there at the reunion for the Chicago Blues Fest.
And
the only one I couldn't get was Wilson Pickett because he was in jail. In New Jersey.
Yeah.
For running over the mayor, whatever town he was from, mayor's lawn with his car. I guess he was drunk and disorderly.
No, he gave me a good. Musicians, if they're in the mood for it, they'll give you like 15 or 20 minutes. With B.B. King, I was so in awe of him. I actually wore a suit. I wore a coat and tie. I said that I was talking about this on the radio just last week during my Memphis show, a couple Sunday nights ago. I said, I know B.B. King's going to have a tuxedo on. I'm not going to go in there with a Juke Joint T-shirt on. He's allowing me into there, so I put a coat and tie on. That picture in there, I'm leaning in, holding up a microphone, and B.B. King's telling some funny story. He's got a big laugh on his face. That's among them. And there's pictures with Bobby Bland, and when I'm sitting there interviewing him, I'm pretty much
right next to
it's
him.
not like
You're reaching across, right?
Yeah.
Right. Not doing that, yeah.
I've done more interviews for 2 good reasons. In my car. 1, we're sitting down. 2, the acoustics are good, especially when the windows are rolled up. And I've got a place to rest my elbow.
And privacy.
Bobby Rush, he was one of the
Never
best.
thought of that.
One of the best interviews. We're parked outside a theater in downtown Jackson, Michigan. He lives in Jackson, Mississippi, but Jackson, Michigan, his sister owns a hairstyling salon. And she does all the advertising for him. She goes out and hangs up those, I call them telephone pole posters. Mm-hmm. You go up with a staple gun and go on down to the next telephone pole. We're parked outside the dressing room door and behind the theater, and all these people are walking right by us. Had no clue that the star of the show was sitting there with me in the car, but our windows were rolled up, and they were all dolled up too.
I remember I had a similar story with Robin Trower. He played the Magic Stick, I think we were at.
Oh, yeah, Detroit.
I think it's Magic Stick, and we went backstage, line up at the door, and this car comes peeling through, and the back window goes down. There was a few of us standing by on the walk to the bus, just talking, and he nods at us from that window of the car going through, and there's a whole line over there of people thinking he's coming up from the backstage area. And I said, thank you for the show. And he said, he went like this or something to the guy. They stopped and he signed my CD. All of a sudden, everybody come running and he said, see ya. Car went on the way. And
I know.
He got off the 2 or 3 of us that were in that group and he thanked us and kept on rolling.
Cool. Yeah. His latest CD I thought was pretty good.
I haven't heard it yet.
Yeah.
I really
it came out.
He's still doing it.
Last spring.
With the lady singing?
Yes.
Yeah. I got to check that out.
Yeah.
When did you get started in photography?
Got started in photography. First of all, I had too much fun in high school. I barely skated out the door. When I graduated, they were like, "See you later."
Don't let the door hit you in the ass.
Yeah,
that was L.A., right?
Yeah, it was L.A. I worked at the grocery store bagging groceries. I did a little bit of grocery stocking of the shelves and a little bit at the cash register. When you had to be at least 18 to run the cash register. Mm-hmm. So I was 18 my senior year. But I got to figure out what in the heck am I going to do? I thought I like sports. I like movies. I thought I'd like to, and I worked at the school newspaper, LA Harbor College, and got to know the journalism professor, became friends. He would invite me up to his cottage up in the mountains near Yosemite. We had a great time. So wherever I went from LA, I followed a girlfriend to Chico, California, up in Northern California, worked for the newspaper there, and one of the guys said, "Here, why don't you borrow a camera and shoot pictures to go with your basketball story, a high school basketball story?" I said, "Well, I got a camera. I just don't have any money for film." He goes, "Oh," sets a brick. There's 20 rolls of Tri-X. "Here, take some of these." And I went, "Oh, how cool is this?" So I go and I start shooting pictures at the game, and I got all my notes because I wrote the story. And the next day, it's in the paper on the front page of the sports section. And people come up to me and says, "Oh, I saw your cool photo of the basketball game last night." "Oh, yeah. Did you read the story?" "I think I did. I just liked your photo." And I started hearing that quite a bit. Mm-hmm. I said, maybe I should do photography. Then took a photo class, and somebody said, "Hey, I heard Ansel Adams is coming to campus."
Wow.
Ansel who? In 1970, 71, I had no idea who. Does everybody know who Ansel Adams is?
Yeah.
Primarily black and white landscape photographer, right. Yosemite National Park, Sequoia, all that kind of stuff. I went out. My boss was the director of PR at the community college, Butte Community College, and I said, "Well, what's Ansel doing after his talk?" And he goes, "Well, he didn't want to eat before his talk, and I know he likes to drink, so he's going to want to go out to get a bite to eat and have a drink." And he says, "I can tag along." "Well, I'll ask him." He said, "Well, I got a couple of students over here that were wondering if they could join us." "Oh, I love students." So we went and sat at the table about this size. There were him, the girl from my photo class, me, my boss. There were 5 of us. So here's 5 of us, right? It was just like this, except I was sitting there. Ansel Adams was sitting here, sort of holding court. And they were totally quiet, because whatever I'd ask a question, Ansel told us a long story. Then I'd ask another question. Then I'd look around the table. Say something. I said, "Well, if you're not going to ask any, I got more questions." And he said, after his 3rd old fashioned, that's what he was drinking. He said, "You have to come to my place in Carmel." Oh, this is the liquor talking. We get out to the parking lot to say goodbye to him. And I said, "What was that about visiting you in Carmel?" He said, "Yeah, Bill's got my phone number and my address." He says, "Come on down and visit, but don't come before 5 o'clock because I got a lot of darkroom work to do. Just come on down, and after 5, it'll be fine. We'll have a drink. We'll sit and visit, hang out with them for I don't know, an hour, whatever. I didn't have a car. I didn't have any way to get to Carmel, even though I used to do a lot of hitchhiking. But when I finally started photography school in Santa Barbara, I could have gone down. So he said, so I wrote to him and I said, call me a couple of days before our appointment for you to come visit me to make sure I didn't get booked, because I get a lot of last minute bookings. He was making serious scratch from his speaking engagements. He'd blast pictures of Yosemite from 1940 on the screen and tell stories about it. And I lived in a house with 6-bedroom house with 8 or 10 of us in the house. And one of the guys had his bedroom right next to the mailbox, so he was always checking the mail. Oh, mail call. Oh, wow, you got an Ansel Adams postcard. Look at that. And he flips it over and he goes, it's from Ansel Adams. Holy smoke. I didn't have any money back then, but once I did, I protected those when you move around a lot of stuff gets lost or torn, dog-eared. But I finally got those things mounted.
Oh, wow.
Yep. He signed one of them in red ink. It faded. I mean, we're talking 1973. But the one he sent me a second one and said he was sorry he couldn't be there. And he signed it in black ink. And that one, you can still read the signature.
Wow.
But yeah. So photography I figured, work for a newspaper. I thought my dream was to work for the LA Times.
Did you go to college in
Santa
photography?
Santa Barbara and major, the whole school, 700 students, all of us were photo majors. That's the only thing they taught. 630 were male, 70 were women. And I met my wife there.
Wow.
So, yeah. Yep.
That's fantastic.
And she's a photographer.
When did you start doing photographs of the blues? Did that come naturally?
The first, I was doing a little bit of sports photography. I love track and field. I love cross country. I love football. But football, you need big lenses, which I didn't have at that point. I had a 50 millimeter lens. Bob Dylan's going back on the road after his motorcycle accident in 66, 67. He was off the road until 1974? Yeah, 1974.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I got tickets to go see Dylan. I took my camera. All I had was do you know what a 50 millimeter lens is? It's like, if I'm taking a picture of you, if I want a close up,
You gotta get rid
you
of
got to
it.
move in. So it's a sort of lens. It's a beginning lens. It's not a wide angle. It's not a telephoto. So I thought, God, there's Dylan. Oh my God. I was by myself. So, there's an empty seat up there. Guy said, my wife, that's her seat. She's in the restroom. You're not going to be able to sit there. Oh, okay. Oh, there's another empty seat. I go up and sit down. And pretty soon I'm up in about the 10th row. And then the house lights come up for the encore. And I raced to the front and basically got pushed by the crowd.
Yeah.
Right up against all these big football player bodyguards that were standing like this, facing the audience, so you didn't get any closer. And I'm saying, oh my God, that's Bob Dylan. And the guy was like, big effing deal. As they say in the radio world. Yeah. I'm going, oh my God. So he was the first musician I photographed, and I photographed him from here to Mike, from that far away.
Excellent.
Robbie Robertson standing right next to him playing guitar. Got that puppy framed. Yeah. So.
Wow. I love the parallel, not to interject to your interview, but when I was in college, I went in as a writer and journalist, following journalism. I was a writer in high school. And I didn't start on the newspaper. I was kind of staying away to get my bearings because I was working full time while I was going through Delta College of all things.
Okay.
And then once I got into the college newspaper, they're like, "Oh, this guy knows music, do entertainment." And I'm like, "Of course, I would love to do that." And I said, "Can I shoot my own stories?" You know, they're like, "Oh, yeah. I mean, you don't need any, you know, you can do your own thing, create your own world." You know.
Yeah.
And I was ordering CDs like from Fred down at School Kids, and all these CDs started coming to me. And I mean, pretty soon every day there was mail like coming for me, promos.
Yeah.
And I was going around the state covering music, and the Times came to me and said, "Well, you know, you didn't graduate from 2-year college yet, but can you work for us?" And
Bay City
Saginaw
Times.
News, too.
Yeah.
So I wrote my own way right into journalism, writing my stories and covering my own. I had a minor in photography. I won the art award at Delta for my photo,
Nice.
and second place in the state for a Seeger shot I took at one of the at this concerts. And it was like I've always combined my journalism and photography side.
Yeah.
Ever since then, you know, for everything I've done until MLive wiped this out, and I still roll with you know, little things here and there, but Route Bay City's who I write for now. But it's fantastic to hear that story because I'm like, oh man, that just reminds me of everything I've been through.
I'm
Started
100%. I'm a big booster of community colleges because I think I had a C minus average in high school. Took geometry twice to skid through it, even though my dad was an engineer. Math didn't transfer to me. So I went to community college because in California, community college was free.
Wow.
$6.50 got you a student body card so you can go to the school football games for free. But community college is where I got into journalism.
Wow.
Yeah.
So how did you end up at CMU?
My first full-time job as a photographer was at the University of Southern California, USC, and which is right down near downtown LA. And I went into the placement office at Brooks Institute of Photography. It had all these job openings, and they were like portrait studio, this and that. I thought, well, I could do that, but I didn't want to do traditional portrait kind of stuff. Didn't want to do weddings or any of that kind of stuff. So, University of Southern California is looking for a photographer to do alumni, sports, blah, 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 all this other stuff. And I went down for the interview. And I didn't have a student portfolio. I worked at the Santa Barbara News Press. So I had a photo credential. I photographed Bruce Springsteen, Chris Christopherson, and numerous people. So I had a not a student portfolio where this is all student assignment, you know. So it was all photojournalism. So I worked there for a very short time, 14 months, but my first week on the job was the opening of the football season. And USC football is like Michigan, Notre Dame, Alabama. It's like all those, you know, we're talking big time. They had a Heisman Trophy candidate. He ended up being number 2 to Tony Dorsett. But he would come over to me occasionally. Ricky Bell was his name. He'd say, "Hey, Robert, I want to be coming into some money here pretty quick." I said, "Yeah, I bet you are." He ended up playing for Tampa Bay back when they were 0-36
Ricky Bell.
in the first 3 years. Yeah, Ricky Bell.
Yeah, I remember that. I had that as one of his cards.
Yeah.
My hero was Tony Dorsett from watching football growing up.
He was the one that
That's
got the
wild
Heisman Trophy.
that you mentioned that.
At Pitt.
Yeah.
The alumni in Hollywood, not alumni, they were connected to Hollywood. The school was connected to Hollywood because movie stars have money in their pockets. So they would stroke them and get them to donate this and that. John Wayne went to school at USC, played football for 2 years, 1925, 26, 27 in that neighborhood. I've got some pictures of John Wayne down in a 3-point stance, a post shot, you know, and he's got his leather helmet on. But I photographed John Wayne would come back to campus, and just coming onto campus, everybody wanted let's go to the John Wayne dinner and hear some stories. So that was really fun. He was wearing a USC baseball hat, and the light was overhead, so his face was all shadow. And I said, "Can I move your hat just a little bit?" And he grabbed my arm. He let go of my hat. I went. Somebody told me later, says, "Where's a toupee?" He didn't want you to get his toupee out of him. But when John Wayne says, "Let go of my hat," you let go of the hat.
Whoa.
But yeah. So working at USC gave me, my portfolio was exactly what CMU needed. So
That's what brought you to Michigan.
that's what brought us to Michigan, Christmas '79. So my first day on the job, January 2nd, 1980.
Wow.
So I worked there full time for 33 years. Peggy was there. She worked at the Mount Pleasant newspaper, the Morning Sun. And then I said to the boss, I said, "This is too much work. I need another photographer." So she applied for the job, and the boss said, "Well, if she gets the job, she can't work under you because you can't work for your spouse. So we'll move her into a different area." And it worked out. And she was there for 25 years. I was there for 33.
Wow.
And that's when John Scheffler was just starting Our Front Porch, which is how I met Fred. Andy Cohen
Yeah.
he always mispronounced your last name. Isn't your last name Reif?
Yeah.
You go, "Oh, this is Freddie Reif, the greatest washboard player in the Western Hemisphere." Everybody would laugh.
It was for the reefer.
Yeah, I've got a tape of that. And
Yeah.
you probably took the
Cassette.
picture.
Yeah.
Because you took the picture when we played at Rubbles or
Yep.
Tom's Foolery or
Yep.
whatever it was called.
Yep. Yeah, there were some good people that came to Tom's Foolery. Gatemouth Brown was there
Really?
2 or 3 times. Johnny Clyde Copeland was there twice. I wanted to meet Gate, so I said to the bar owner, "Hey, where's Gate right now?" He says, "Oh, he's getting a bite to eat upstairs." So I went upstairs. I walk in, white guy. He says, "Oh, there's my man." And I said, "You got something for me?" I think I knew what he meant.
Yeah.
And then Roger Hitz, who was a CMU grad, worked for the Morning Sun, wrote a column and all this. He walks in and he goes, "There's my man." "Oh, Gate, all right. I'll be back in a few minutes. I live around the corner." So he went and got him some weed. Yeah, I was not going to be the one.
Do you still put on the annual Cajun Zydeco?
That went on for 26 years. And
Yeah.
in the last few years, having 500 people turn out at $25 a ticket didn't pay for it.
Right.
So the last 3 years, we would have 500. It really needed 800 people. 800 people to buy a ticket, not counting the freebies that, the hangers
Well, I
on.
remember the times we played, it was
Packed.
pretty packed.
Yeah. Well, that's why the very first one had C.J. Chenier, who was the accordion-playing son of the king of Zydeco, Clifton Chenier. Katie Webster played a solo blues and boogie set on a grand piano, but the opening was Fred Reif on stage with Lazy Lester. And Lazy Lester gets up there, and as soon as he starts playing, the dance floor was jammed.
Yeah.
Everybody was on the dance floor. It was like, and the place was, hardly any of them were students. They were
really?
People later in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Yeah, it just never appealed to students. And, it wasn't like $3.50. It was $20 to get in. Anyway, yeah, that went on for 26 years.
Okay.
Wow, Freddie. And a story,
Yeah, we
though.
played at it a couple times.
Yeah. And then you did the concert they called it Between the Ponds, over by the Athletic Center.
Right.
Outdoors, like on a Wednesday evening
Okay.
in the summertime.
Mhm.
Yep.
How did you get into the radio show?
I'm not a musician, but I tried to be. I bought an Yamaha acoustic guitar. And I thought, well, I really need a teacher. So when we moved here, somebody said, oh, I know John Kelly. He teaches acoustic guitar, and he'll come right to your house. Oh, okay. We comes to the house, and he's showing me a few chords. And then he goes, I got a nice shelf of records over there. And probably 300 or 400 albums. So he said, who have you got in there? And I said, well, Bob Dylan, Woody Guthrie, Sonny Terry, Brownie McGee, Little John Lee Hooker, Joan Baez. He goes, well, I do this folk music show at CMU Public Radio. Why don't you come on, bring your records, and we'll play them. Really? So I told a friend of mine in California, he said, oh, yeah. Oh, that's cool. The college station. He said, yeah. He goes, so all the kids in the dorms can hear you? No, this is an NPR station. Yeah. He goes, get out of here. You mean With All Things Considered and Garrison Keillor? Yeah, we carry all that stuff. That's a real radio. How did you get it? But I took my Bob Dylan records and Sonny Terry and Brownie, Lead Belly, and all that kind of stuff. And then after several months of doing that on Saturday night from 8 to 11 o'clock, there were probably 6 different co-hosts. Several times somebody didn't show up, and the student board op would say, John Scheffler, there's nobody here to do homespun. What are we going to do? So he reaches out to Tom Ball, Tom Ball,
Yeah, Tom was
and
on
me,
the show. Mm-hmm.
And he said, you guys are pretty reliable. How would you like to co-host? You do it one Saturday, Tom will do it the next Saturday. So you just alternate. You're not doing it together. You're doing it on alternating Saturday nights. And I did that from 81 to 85, which is when I launched the Juke Joint.
How did you sell the station on Juke Joint?
Well, we carried a radio show from the network that came from the University of Northern Iowa, of all places, KUNI, with the call letters, a guy named Peter Ashoff.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a nationally distributed 1-hour show, which we carried on Sunday nights at 6 o'clock, and I listened to it. And he told stories about, it wasn't just playing the records, he tells stories about the artists, about Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters and Lightnin' Hopkins, and then occasionally he'd go back and play some pre-war stuff. And he's playing a song with panpipes. And I said, that's a Canned Heat song. Nope, not a Canned Heat song. That's a Ragtime, Texas Henry Thomas recorded that in 1927, and Canned Heat borrowed the riff for their melody for Going Up the Country.
Yeah.
You can hear, and on there, I think they played it on a flute.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. To get the panpipe sort of a sound. But Peter Ashoff decided not to do the show anymore, so we were without a show. So I said, I can do a blues show. Yeah, we'll think about it. Because you start shows on a quarter system, like January, February, March is the first quarter, second quarter, April, May, June, blah, blah, blah. All right. How about you start the first Sunday night in April 1985? 8 o'clock, 1 hour. Let's see what you can do. Well, I started getting postcards, phone calls from, this is all pre-computer, pre-email days.
Right.
They started coming in, people would send me postcards, or a student would have notebook paper, and he'd write in. He said, God, I didn't know who Lightnin' Hopkins was. I thought it was a cool name, but man, that guy can play guitar. And then he would just tear it out of his notebook, put a stamp on an envelope, and mail it to me. I still have, I probably got, I don't mean to overstate it, I probably got maybe over those early years, maybe 75 to 100 letters and postcards. People would go on vacation down to Mississippi or Memphis or Chicago. And they say, oh, here's a blues postcard. Let's send this to Robert. So they'd send it to me.
Wow.
And then the only negative comment people made was, how come it's just 1 hour?
Yeah.
Can we do 2 hours? Okay, let's see how. In September, it went to 2 hours. And we came up to our first fundraiser. Boom! Oh, man. The eyebrows went up. I think we have a winner here, folks. So it does real well. I don't mean to overstate it, but I'm very pleased that people like the show enough that they contribute. You know, some people $25, some people $50 or $100, some people even more than that.
Well, it goes all the way up to Sault Ste. Marie, doesn't it?
Well, we have 8 transmitters, plus we're streaming.
Right.
And I've taken to giving out my email address at 9 o'clock on Sunday night. Oh, it went to 3 hours in 1988, so 8 to 11. 9 o'clock, I said, well, I've just heard from Fred Reif in Ann Arbor, and he was, really enjoyed hearing that John Lee Hooker tune, and now he's asking for somebody else. So next week I'll bring that with me. So I started giving out my email address. Now, on an average Sunday night, anywhere is from 20 to 40 emails. And I'll say, just write something brief. I just want to know your first name. You don't have to get personal. My name's Fred Reif, and here's my, that's not it. Oh, I just heard from Fred from Ann Arbor. I just want to know your first name and where you're listening. So I've heard from listeners in Hawaii, South Korea. Somebody took their computer, their laptop, and listened when they were in Antarctica.
Jeez.
And took their Juke Joint T-shirt and said, okay, I'm going to open this coat for just a few seconds. Shoot the dang photo for Robert. She opens up her coat, and here's her Juke Joint T-shirt. All this ice and everything in the background. But people, would just send me pictures.
Wow, that's cool.
I think I have some of them are on there. They're pretty funny.
Wonderful.
One of my favorite recent ones, listener from Ann Arbor, went to Liverpool. And he says, got to be some Beatles stuff, the Cavern Club. It's got to be something I can go do. So you can go to Abbey Lane, and you can, go to Penny Lane. Not Abbey Lane.
Abbey Road.
Abbey Road.
Yeah.
Penny Lane.
Yeah.
They have signs, people.
Strawberry Fields.
All that. So there's obviously a statue of the 4 Beatles walking side by side, not the Abbey Road where they're walking in single file. They're walking 4 abreast. This listener from Ann Arbor had his Juke Joint T-shirt on, and he's standing amongst the Beatles who are walking. It's not on a pedestal. It's not like George Washington up high or Abraham Lincoln or whatever at the Lincoln Memorial. It's like 4 guys walking down the sidewalk together. The Beatles, full length, head to toe, and you can identify them. And he's just standing there like this, and I went, and they must be 7 feet tall. I said, how tall are you? And he says, about 6 foot. I said, because the Beatles are like, they were not 7 feet tall. They're just it's a really big statue. So he sent me that. I don't think I should have put that on there. Yeah, I had some really fun ones.
It's all right. It's things you want to send. You know how to get hold of us if you want to add anything.
Do any of you know a photographer who used to work at the Saginaw News named Bernie Ang?
Yeah.
He sends me some of the most creative. He's an outdoorsman.
Yeah.
He went canoeing and fishing on the Ausable River. There's snow on the ground. He pulled his boat up to the shore. He got out. He had 4 layers of clothes on, but his Juke Joint T-shirt was on the outer layer. And he has his coat open. His buddy is at the stern of the canoe. In the background, they have a hunting dog pet. Dogs don't hunt fish. I don't think. The dog is just relaxing, chilling at the front of the, and Bernie is kneeling down. That might be on there, but he sent it to me, and it's priceless. People look at it, says, people out west, when I show my friends that I went to school with out in California, said, Michigan people are a pretty hardy group. I said, well, you gotta be.
Yeah.
You gotta be.
Weather like this, for sure.
Right, yeah.
And that wraps up part 1 of 2 for season 5, episode 1, here in the MMHP in the 989 with the Duke of Juke, Mr. Robert Barclay. We want to thank all our listeners for all the ears over the years, and we're going to keep it going here in season 5 strong. We've got so much up our sleeves, we can't wait to get it out to you. So tune in here in 2 weeks for part 2 with the Duke of Juke, Mr. Robert Barclay, here in the MMHP in the 989.
On behalf of our hosts, this podcast wouldn't be here without generosity of the Bay City Historical Museum, which hosts the Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame. We'd also like to thank all of our guests, and especially to the listeners. The MMHP is found at 989.network, or where all podcasts can be found. You can find updated information as well as Dr. J and Sir Fred's Picks of the Week on Facebook. Also on Facebook, check out Mr. Mike's Local Music Live series and Scott's Mid-Mitten 15 from Harvest Canteen Studios, featuring one-on-one interviews with Michigan music artists. You can connect with Scott on the web at scottbakermusic.com, Dr. J at michiganrockandrolllegends.com, Sir Fred at fredrife.com, and Mr. Mike on YouTube as Mr. BT1. That's MRBTEE and the number 1.
On behalf of us hosts, Dr. J, Sir Fred, Mr. Mike, and myself, we'd like to thank Mr. Eddie Switek, the voice of the MMHP and the 989.